Hi guys, I'm coming to you today to talk about some of the most frequently asked questions that I get about becoming a travel photographer and writer. Indeed, over the past 4 years, I've gotten so many questions that range from how do I quit my job and travel the world and create stories about it, to how do you get published in National Geographic, to where do you get jobs from, how much do you make, and all of those things. So today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover some of the most common themes that I hear people ask me all the time. But before we get started, let me just introduce myself real quick. So I'm Yulia. I'm a published travel photographer and writer. And 4 years ago, I quit my corporate job because I really hated to sit in a cubicle. And instead, I wanted to become this traveling storyteller. And I did. And so for the past 4 years, I've been really fortunate to work with some amazing publications like National Geographic, like BBC Travel, and some others, and create stories that I'm really proud of. But yeah, so one of the biggest questions that I get is, let's say, how do you start this career, right? How do you actually go from being a corporate employee or somebody with a job that they are not that passionate about to a passionate storyteller with assignments all over the world? Hopefully, post pandemic, this will continue, and with stories in different publications. And unfortunately, I have perhaps a bit of a disappointing answer to you, because if you're looking for a magic formula or something quick and easy that you can do in order to make this a reality for yourself, I'm here to tell you that that doesn't exist. That does not exist. When I quit my job, I thought the same. I thought, okay, I'm gonna quit. I'm gonna just start pushing in all kinds of different directions, and in 6 months, I'm gonna figure it all out. And it took me much, much longer than 6 months to really start understanding how this industry works. Where do you get jobs from? How do you approach publications, and all of the things that are related to that? So the number one point that I want to put across to you is that it takes time. Just like with any other industries, with any other kind of spheres that you want to get into, figuring out how it works and learning the ropes and building your name and your reputation with your work, all of that takes time, right? It's not going to happen overnight. So that, depending on how you look at it, that could be something disappointing, but it could also be something hopeful, because what that also means is that over time you make progress, and over time you start seeing the way to make this a viable career for yourself. And what I like to say is, like, imagine like you're building a road, right? So you have some bricks with you, and you put a brick here and then a brick here and then a brick here, and you just keep going and you keep building that road. And honestly, this is the way to do it. I don't know any other way. I don't know any other, again, quick magic formula that would turn you into a Nat Geo photographer overnight. That just doesn't work, right? But that should give you inspiration that as long as you start acting and start putting your ideas and your stories out there into the world, then little by little, it's going to add up into a viable career. And then the other thing actually that's related to that is, what is one of the reasons why it takes such a long time to build this career? Well, it's because it takes time to develop relationships with editors who are the gatekeepers at these publications, right? So when I just started, my dream was to be published in National Geographic. I mean, all of us, right? Many of us have been inspired by work in National Geographic over the years, although there's also very questionable practices that have been going on in National Geographic and other publications for many years, but this is not the subject of today's conversation. But many people all over the world have been inspired by National Geographic brand for many years. And so of course I was there too, right? For me this was also a dream. But then, like, what do you do? How do you even figure that out? So what I did is I went on their website, and at that point, I'm not sure if it's still there, but at that point there was an actual physical address where people could send their queries to, and I did. So I quit my job in 2016, and I think maybe a couple of months later, I sent out my first query, and never heard back. Never ever heard back from them again. And that just tells you that, first of all, this is a very competitive industry, and of course National Geographic is kind of at the top of that industry. And then also think about editors in this way. They're humans just like us, right? You're much more likely to do work with, to do projects with, to engage with somebody that you know. If somebody who you've never seen before puts something in front of you and says, hey, look at me, I'm so great, I have this great idea, more often than not, we're not inclined to do anything about that, right? Because we don't know that person. We don't know what they're after. We don't know what their story is. We don't know what they're capable of. So all of these are obstacles on the way. And so just like with any other industry, what I've learned is that it's really helpful if you can start developing relationships with editors in the publications that you want to work with. But again, that takes time, right? Because you can't be some obnoxious person who just shows up at an editor's office and says, hey, hire me. Although that has happened, not with me, but I've heard stories about that. But so, you introduce yourself, maybe you attend some events together, maybe you cross paths somewhere, you start pitching, you start sending them your ideas, and they start kind of seeing what you have to offer. And then little by little, that's how you develop those relationships, and that's how you start working together. But again, it doesn't happen overnight. You have to invest time and effort into that, right? And that's why this is a career that is not. It's a dream for many people, but it's not easy to actually make it a reality, because it does take perseverance, and it does take like focused effort and time to develop this into something viable over time. And then the other thing that I want to mention too is, again, kind of related to that question of how do I pitch National Geographic, or how do I pitch any publication that you're interested in working with. One of the things that is really easy for an editor to judge is whether or not you have actually read their publication. And this may sound really kind of obvious and a simple piece of advice, but you would be surprised how many people don't follow that, right? So before you're approaching a publication that you're really excited to work with, you would be surprised to learn how many people don't actually read that publication, right? So they just see the big brand name or something, let's say Travel and Leisure or Condé Nast, and they're like, yes, I want to be a part of that. But if they haven't actually picked up the magazine, or haven't looked at the websites, or haven't read any of their stories, their chances of success when they're reaching out to those editors are going to be probably close to zero, because it's really easy for an editor to see if the person who is pitching knows what this publication is looking for, right? Because the goal for you is always to make an editor's job easier. They have a quite tough job, right? They have to fill their publications with stories, with a pipeline of stories and content, and especially if it's a digital publication, that pipeline is never ending, so they're always looking for stories. But the stories have to fit with this publication's voice, with the publication's theme, editorial priorities, all kinds of things, right, that they're working on. And so you will be able to start understanding what those priorities, themes, a voice of the publication are if you are a reader of that publication, right? You know what they're looking for because you've been reading those stories in their magazine. And so when you're developing your pitch and you're putting your story in front of that editor, or your idea in front of that editor, they will see right away if you know the publication or if you don't. And so that's a really important piece that I think a lot of people overlook, and then they're surprised, well, I've never heard back from this publication. Well, that could be one of the reasons why. And then finally, what I want to mention is that related to pitching, a lot of times we overlook, I think, one of the most important pieces of what makes a pitch successful or not. And that is why you and why now, right? So why are you the one to tell the story that you're offering as an idea to this editor? And then why is it relevant right now? Because we all have stories, we all have a lot of different ideas and a lot of different things to say, but the editors, again, they have to kind of curate that, all of that content, right? And they have to make sure that whatever content or whatever stories end up in their publication, that they are relevant, and then that they have the best people possible to tell that story. Again, this is also a theory, because we're not going to get into this right now, but there is also not a very important discussion happening with the fact that particularly the creators from the Black community, photographers and writers, are not tapped to tell the stories that they're best suited to tell. So that's an issue for sure. But in theory, this is what should happen, right? Is that the best person to tell the story tells that story. So when you're sending out your pitch, if you're able to convince the editor or make a compelling case for why you are the one to tell the story and why this story needs to be heard right now, then your pitch is going to have that much more chances of success. And some of the, you probably can ask me right now, well, what does that mean, right? What does that mean? Am I the one to tell the story right now? I'll tell you an example from my own career. So over the past 4 years or so, I've been traveling to Jordan for most of that time consistently. I've probably been to Jordan, I don't know, close to 20 times now. And I've spent time there both in and out. I've spent months there, weeks at a time. And so I've developed really strong ties to the community there, particularly in Amman, which is the capital, but also in the desert of Wadi Rum. And so I have spent so much time with the people there that I've started to understand their culture, their lives, and just what's going on in that region a little bit better. So then if I'm pitching a story about the Bedouin culture in the Wadi Rum desert, and let's say another person is pitching that same story, like they had the idea as well, but they've been to Jordan once on a 3-day trip, let's say, and then I've been to Jordan, over these 4 years, I've been there close to 20 times. Who do you think is more qualified to tell that story, right? So think of it in that way too. Like, why do you think that you have, I guess, the authority to tell the story, and why does the story needs to be heard right now? So these are just some of the things to think about when it comes to putting your ideas out there and crafting your stories and putting them in front of publications. But I just wanted to touch on some of the questions that I hear all the time, right? So again, it cannot happen overnight. If you're looking for a quick and easy way to quit your job and start making a living as a travel photographer and writer the next day, just know that it's not going to happen that way, right? It takes time to build a new career from scratch. And one of the reasons why it takes time is because you need time to develop relationships with editors. That just, we're just humans, right? We like to work with who we know. So when we know somebody, we're more likely to assign work to these people. So if you're considering this career, then just know that it takes time and start working on it. Like, the sooner you start, the better, the more prepared you will be when you finally decide to make this switch. And then when it comes to pitching, the two key things that I think a lot of people overlook is that first read the publication, know its theme, know its voice, know its priorities, and what are the kind of different areas or topics that it usually covers, and then really try to explain or try to position to the editor why are you the one to best tell the story, and why does the story needs to be heard right now. So I hope this was useful, and I will be doing more of these going forward. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and this was a useful conversation to you. Thank you so much for watching.